Suddenly, the carriage stopped. I opened the door and got out. At once the carriage drove away, and I was alone in front of the dark, silent castle. I stood there, looking up at it, and slowly the big wooden door opened. A tall man stood in front of me. His hair was white, and he was dressed in black from head to foot. "Come in, Mr. Harker," he said. "I am Count Dracula." He held out his hand, and I took it. It was as cold as ice. I went into the castle, and the Count carefully locked the door behind me. He put the key into his pocket and turned to go upstairs. I followed him, and we came to a room where a wood fire burned brightly. In front of it, there was a little table with food and drink on it. The Count asked me to sit down and eat, but he did not eat with me. Later, we sat and talked by the fire. His English was very good, and while we talked, I had time to look at him carefully. His face was very white. His ears were like the ears of a cat, and his teeth were strong like the teeth of an animal. There was hair on his hands, and his fingers were very long. When he touched me, I was afraid. It was nearly morning when I went to bed, and outside, the wolves were still howling. The next morning, I found my breakfast on the little table in front of the fire. Now that it was light, I could see that Castle Dracula was old and dirty. I saw no servants all that day. The Count did not come to breakfast, but there was a letter from him on the table. "Go anywhere in the castle," it said, "but some of the rooms are locked. Do not try to go into these rooms." When the Count came back in the evening, he wanted to know all about his new house in England. "Well," I began, "it's a very big house, old and dark, with a high wall all round it. There are trees everywhere. That's why the house is dark. It has a little church, too." And I showed him some pictures of it. He was pleased about the church. "Ah," he said, "so I shall be near the dead." We talked for a long time, and once I fell asleep. I woke up suddenly and found the Count's face near me. The smell which came from him was terrible. It was the smell of death. "You're tired," the Count said. "Go to bed now." And when he smiled, his face was the face of a wolf. Our business was now finished. The Count had all the papers for his new house, and there was nothing to keep me in Transylvania or in Castle Dracula. But the Count did not want me to leave. I was alone with him in the castle, but I never saw him in the daytime. I only saw him at night, when he came and sat with me. We always talked until the morning, and he asked me many questions about England. "I have plans to go there myself soon," he said. "Tell me about sending things to England by ship." So we talked about ships and the sea, and I thought about Mina and her friend Lucy. Lucy and her mother were staying by the sea, and Mina was planning to visit them there sometime. Stupidly, I told the Count about them. There was no mirror in my bedroom, but I had one with me, a present from Mina. One morning, I was standing in front of it, and I was shaving. Suddenly, a hand touched me, and a voice said, "Good morning." The Count was standing next to me. He was standing next to me, but I could not see him in the mirror. My hand shook, and I cut myself. Blood began to run down my face, and I saw that Count Dracula was watching it hungrily. Suddenly, he put out his hand. He had a wild look in his eyes, and I was afraid. But his hand touched the gold cross at my neck, and his face changed. He took the mirror from me, went to the window, and a minute later the mirror was lying in 1,000 pieces far below. He did not speak, but left the room quickly. And I stood there and asked myself why I could not see this man in the mirror. I went over to the window and looked out. I was high above the ground. Many of the doors in the castle were locked. Suddenly, I understood. I was a prisoner.